Now, many of us, when we think of wilderness, we think of places like the Himalayas, places like the Western Ghats, the places behind me in the western side of India. It's really hard to try and define what a wilderness is. Really, a wilderness, I would imagine, would be somewhere with very few people. And certain species would represent wilderness. For instance, the North American grizzly bear or the Indian tiger. Animals like leopard, or perhaps more fittingly for where I am now, the Western Ghats, the king cobra. Now, the king cobra is the largest venomous snake in the world, and even though it is found in different parts of Asia, the Western Ghats here is its real stronghold. You know, king cobras can grow to over 5.5 meters in length. That's a big snake, especially for a venomous snake. It's also said that a king cobra can actually stand up and look a grown man in the eye, which is quite terrifying if you think about it, really. You know, now, being a wilderness area, the Western Ghats, there's still conflict with snakes in urban areas. Some of the problems that happen in today's world is that certain features of the day-to-day movement of an animal can be so affected by humans, and it can actually lead to conflict. One of the biggest problems with the situation in the Western Ghats with the king cobra at the moment is the fact that, you know, its favourite food is a snake called the rat snake. Now, wherever humans go, you know, there's rubbish, there's rats, and so hence there's more rat snakes, and this is what encourages king cobras from places like this into human settlements. Now, there was a study recently done, because, you know, let's make no mistake, we don't really know much about the species that live in these places, especially the king cobra. So a study was done, and they radio-collared 2 king cobras, and what they found was the king cobra would, even though it would be translocated to ridges way from human settlements, the king cobra would go back and actually be found in human villages, which is quite amazing, really. You know, if you think about it, you're putting an animal back where it apparently belongs, and it's going back into an urban area to look for food. Now, that's not to say that there isn't enough food here. It's just that, you know, animals are going to do whatever they can to give themselves the best possibility of survival. And if that means going to a town where there's more rats and rat snakes, then it's going to do that, you know. You know, in these particular mountains, when the monsoon comes, you know, it's 9.5 meters of rain is the average rainfall in the monsoon. Now, when you think that half a meter of rain in Britain is usually, like, the annual rainfall is about 600 millimeters, which is reducing actually year by year. So it's about half a meter of rain, which is beneficial for the king cobra because it's a really good swimmer. I don't know if ever you've seen a grass snake in the UK swim. Really good swimmer. The king cobra swims just like that. You know, obviously in the UK we have the grass snake, we have the adder, our only poisonous snake, and the smooth snake, which is actually now really endangered. It needs specific sandy heathlands like down in Hampshire, and there was a fire a few years ago which wiped out quite a few of them, so there's very little left now. So the basic point is wilderness areas and urban areas can support the same animals, and usually in larger densities than the wilderness areas. So really hard to sort of define wilderness, you know, when the parameters are being stretched so far. This is also the case with leopards, you know. I've talked about things like this before, people saying it's not possible for leopards to live in England. It is possible to live, for leopards to live in England or any other area where there's people. This has been proved time and time again. You think in a wild environment such as this one, a leopard has got to kill a sambar deer or a mouse deer, and it's got to hunt, you know, maybe 8 times before it's successful. In the more rural villages or suburban areas of India, what they found is 80% of the leopard's food will be dog and domestic animals and so forth, which actually means that the leopard is a lot more ambush opportunities in suburban areas, and dogs are a little bit easier to catch. You know, a leopard can sit on top of a 1-story building and just jump straight on top of a dog and take a dog, and he's probably got more chance of success hunting dogs than what it normally would. So in comparison to an urban or a wilderness area, the leopard would probably prosper more in the urban area. The only obstacle it will have is that there's more people around. And Dr. Vijaya down in Pune, in further north, going towards Mumbai way, she's done an amazing study where literally she camera trapped leopards that were hanging around towns, released them just to get an idea of what their movements were going to be. And every textbook person who reads up on leopards here, they've got huge territories. She found that in these village type suburban areas, leopards could have territories as little as 1 square mile. They actually go to where the food is, they know where the food is. They don't need to roam hundreds and hundreds of miles. So, a really interesting comparison there. Now, talking about urban leopards and wilderness areas, such an amazing view, I've absolutely been eaten alive on this trip, but one thing I have to say is that you just cannot compare, landscapes such as this. There's tigers. There was actually, I'm a little bit nervous because there was a sloth bear here, and actually they are more dangerous a few nights ago, so I'm just being on my guard right now. But a lot of the forest you see behind me, this wilderness forest, and one thing I found when I travelled in Borneo was, I said he said, a lot of the forests had been cleared, and even in the Western Ghats where I am now, 80% of the forest has gone. But I turned around to the guide and I said, "What do you mean it's covered with forest?" And he said, no, this is secondary forest. So what had actually happened is original rainforest has been cleared. Now you can never get back the diversity of species in a rainforest that's been there for millions of years. The difference here is that the secondary woodland comes in, and within 30 years you've got a very dense sort of jungle environment again. Never going to be as rich and to get back the systems that were originally there in the rainforest. Now for big animals like tigers and leopards, it's not such a problem, but the small things like the frogs could be lost forever, and that's happened quite a lot in the Western Ghats. I think they've only got 20% now of the original primeval forest, which is horrific, if you take into account the vastness of these mountains. So quite sad, but also wilderness, we're constantly trying to clarify what wilderness is. Wilderness does not have to be primeval, it could have regrown, or it could be secondary forest, but it's still wilderness, even on the edge of a town. There's some great places in London. We did a habitat creation project recently in northwest London, and because we stick to the roads and the paths, we don't actually know what's around us. And in this part of northwest London in Greenford, we were doing a habitat creation project for a school, and it backed onto a stream. Well, this river was a gorge, and it was just fenced on both sides. No one goes in there, and it looked as if it could have been like just one of these mud-flat type shallow rivers that run through a valley in Africa. It was wild, a green corridor into the city. But I've lived in northwest London my whole life. I never knew it was there, and it's a huge area just because I did this particular job and I had access to it. So wilderness can be all around also. It doesn't have to just be in the far corners of the planet. Now, funnily enough, we have the same problem in the UK. We have the sort of opposite problem in the UK, whereas if we had more predators, especially in places like Scotland, we would be able to control the deer a little bit better. And I understand there's management things there, situations as well, such as the heather and the burning, and it's a big industry. But to regenerate a wilderness, you need that ecological balance. I was just talking about the rainforest being cut down. You start losing that web of life in an environment, and it can dramatically affect the landscape. If we had less deer in Scotland and we didn't manage the land so much, a lot of the wilderness and trees would try and come back. So by having a major predator like a leopard in the UK can only help the situation. So to sum up, really, wilderness as we know it can be found anywhere. Wherever there's food, shelter and water, animals are going to find places to live. places are going to go hidden, and the more nucleated lives we lead in cities and urban environments, the more we're going to lose track of the outside environments, and the more wildernesses we can find around us everywhere.